Welcome back to Alpha Recap. Markets closed on April 22nd, and what a day. A serious patchwork of winners and laggards. We had concentrated rallies in crypto and parts of the energy and renewables complex, while other sectors felt more pressure. As always, if you have questions, you can reach us at stockalpha.ai.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it was one of those days where headlines really mattered. Policy moves, court rulings, and big capital flows were calling the shots.
Let's start with the headline winners. Bitcoin was back above $78,000, and that really set the tone for crypto-related flows. What did you make of that move?
So, what really stands out here is the role of ETF inflows and short covering pushing price. Participants were also citing institutional signals, things like conference panel activity, and even an example of military tech experimentation, which lowered some counterparty concerns and helped liquidity.
Right. And the market was watching a near-term test up around $79,200. That felt like a technical line people were betting around.
Exactly. When a relatively illiquid asset gets concentrated flows into listed products, you can get outsized moves. It wasn't just retail enthusiasm, it was systematic buying into spot products and some forced short covering. Right.
Switching to renewables and utilities, the tape was constructive thanks to a federal court ruling that removed a permitting hurdle for U.S. solar and wind projects. There were also a few big project announcements, right?
Yeah, that tracks. There were a few tangible wins. A corporate 3-gigawatt solar technology partnership, a 650-megawatt wind project in Ukraine, and a 50-megawatt battery contract. Those are concrete milestones that reduce execution risk for developers.
Lay that out simply for listeners who ask, why does a court ruling move stocks?
Courts can affect permitting and regulatory certainty. For big projects that take years and lots of capital, reducing uncertainty means developers can sign contracts, break ground, and expect revenue sooner. It's the difference between maybe we can build and we're moving forward.
Cannabis also got a lift on policy chatter. A top lawmaker said federal reform has the votes. That has been a long time coming.
I mean, when you step back and look at this, policy is the dominant valuation overhang for that sector. Credible talk about rescheduling or broader banking access can unlock capital and distribution channels that have been closed off.
Quick reaction segment, short takes. Which sectors underperformed?
Financials, healthcare, and parts of industrials took hits. Financials felt caution because private credit was under scrutiny. There was chatter about bank charters and debate about central bank independence. That mix tightened risk spreads and hurt sentiment.
Healthcare had a pretty mixed day too. Some promising trial data mixed with arbitration-driven pricing pressure, which muddied the outlook.
Right. And the other thing is, arbitration outcomes and reimbursement uncertainty can offset scientific progress. So even when you see good clinical headlines, pricing headwinds create selective investor interest.
Industrials were dealing with higher shipping costs and a big supplier judgment. Home Depot and others were talking CapEx to fight back with automation and productivity investments.
The theme there was CapEx to offset logistics. A $600 million U.S. manufacturing boost was part of that narrative. Companies are trying to trade one-time cost pressure for longer-term efficiency, but that takes time.
Okay, time for a transition to the day's most significant moves. Break these down for us, starting with crypto.
Bitcoin moved back above $78,000, and market participants were eyeing that $79,200 test. ETF inflows and short covering were cited as the main drivers. Structurally, the story split between on-chain fundamentals and regulatory cadence. But today, the capital flows dominated price action.
Why should people care beyond crypto traders?
Large concentrated flows into listed crypto products can spill into broader risk appetite. If that price pushed sustainably above the technical level, it could have broadened risk-on positioning in high beta assets. Conversely, if flows reversed, you could get a sharp unwind.
Got it. Renewables next.
The federal court ruling cleared a notable permitting roadblock, which materially lowers execution risk for solar and wind projects. Add the 3-gigawatt partnership, the 650-megawatt wind deal, and the 50-megawatt battery contract. Those were the project-level news items that gave investors more confidence around future revenue for developers and contractors.
Cannabis. Quick recap.
There was fresh chatter that federal reform has the votes, plus continued state retail reforms. That reduced regulatory overhang that has capped upside for years, and ETFs and retail-focused names reacted accordingly.
The pace of policy surprises keeps everyone on their toes.
Honestly, I was a bit surprised by this one.
Energy had breadth, a mix of traditional oil and renewables news. Tell listeners why that coupling matters.
Energy's two engines were both running. On the fossil fuel side, stronger crude trade flows, record flows from Brazil, and pipeline advances in California supported near-term oil sentiment. On the clean side, more storage and solar adoption stories signaled longer-term capex trends. Investors are treating these as complementary. Short-term oil demand and long-term grid buildouts can both drive activity across the same sector group.
Healthcare and financials. Summarize the headline risks there.
Healthcare had some scientific wins, but arbitration and reimbursement questions weighed on earnings visibility for certain subgroups. Financials were subdued because of private credit scrutiny, talk about bank charters, and political debates about central bank independence, all of which tightened perceived risk and could widen credit spreads.
Short reaction. Anything notable in tech and consumer?
Tech was mixed. New AI chips and corporate AI moves mattered, but cyber and privacy issues added headline risk. Consumer showed idiosyncratic winners like automation investments and store expansion, but shipping and input cost pressure created selective negatives.
Let's zoom out. What were the cross-sector themes and correlations you were watching?
5 big themes. 1. Policy as a primary mover. Sectors moved on regulatory or legislative signals. 2. Capital flows and liquidity concentration. Crypto was the clearest example of how ETF inflows can dominate price. 3. Energy renewables coupling. The sector is bifurcated but interconnected. 4. Cost and supply chain pinch points. Shipping and supplier judgments hurt margins. And 5. Tech risks versus AI opportunity. AI infrastructure names reacted differently than others to the same headlines.
Give a plain language example of how policy changes can move an entire sector.
Sure. Imagine a lawmaker signals that federal cannabis rescheduling is likely. That single development lowers legal risk, which lets bigger funds and banks think about lending and investing. Suddenly, a sector that felt frozen by federal law gets new capital and distribution possibilities. That's a huge re-rating force.
Very clear. Now, some actionable insights for listeners. High level and informational only.
First, watch policy calendars closely. For cannabis, renewables, and financials, timing matters. Second, monitor concentrated capital flows. ETF inflows can outweigh fundamentals in the near term. Third, separate short-term trade signals from structural shifts. Project wins in renewables are multi-year stories, while oil moves can be cyclical. Fourth, embrace dispersion inside sectors. Look at company-specific catalysts. Fifth, prioritize liquidity and stress testing. Headlines can trigger rapid repricing. And finally, keep an eye on macro cues like inflation data, central bank commentary, oil inventories, and any congressional movement on big policy items.
Short check. Any corporate names listeners should monitor just for headlines and context?
For monitoring purposes only, Bitcoin price action and Aave governance were in the crypto notes. In consumer, Best Buy, Home Depot, Lululemon, Party City, and United Natural Foods surfaced in headlines. In tech and finance, Adobe, Tesla, and Vertex got mentions for positioning and guidance risk. None of this is a recommendation, just names to watch for news flow.
Risks that could flip the script?
Several. Policy reversals or delays could quickly reverse sector sentiment. For example, if cannabis legislation stalled or the renewable court ruling was appealed. Flow reversals in crypto would also be a fast risk because of concentration. A hawkish surprise from central bankers or a macro shock could pressure rate-sensitive sectors. And finally, a supply chain shock or a major supplier judgment could ripple across industrials and consumer companies.
We promised plain talk. If someone asked, what happened overall today? What's the simplest summary?
Momentum was concentrated, not broad. Crypto and renewables got the upside on concrete catalysts, while financials, healthcare, and parts of industrials were hit by headline risks. The market was neutral overall, pockets of strength but limited breadth.
Final quick takes for listeners. 3 clear takeaways?
1. Watch policy and court calendars. They drove today's winners. 2. Track concentrated flows. ETF inflows and large financings can move prices fast. 3. Be explicit about time horizon. Separate trade signals from multi-year structural changes.
Investment reminder. This discussion was informational only. We did not provide personalized advice or recommend buying, selling, or holding any security. Analysts note market developments to inform decision-making. Listeners should consult their own advisors.
Thanks. And one last micro point. Liquidity management matters in this environment. When headlines move sectors, you want plans for different scenarios.
If you have questions about anything we covered today, head to stockalpha.ai, where you can ask us directly and we'll answer live. For more market analysis and insights, visit stockalpha.ai. Thanks for listening to Alpha Recap. We'll see you next time.